Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Why Do I Do It podcast, the podcast where we talk to professional performers about their worst, weirdest, and most embarrassing gigs. This week, I'm very pleased to say our guest is the fantastic Dom Joly. Dom Joly is probably best known for his work on Trigger Happy TV, but he's done a hell of a lot. You know, he's been on Bear Grylls' The Island, he's a successful travel writer, he's been in the game for a long, long time, and he's got a lot of stories to tell. Very interesting stories of him going to school with Osama bin Laden. 100% true, very interesting and funny, and some absolutely hilarious stories of behind the scenes of his time on Trigger Happy TV. If you like the podcast, please keep listening, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, do whatever you got to do, because I love doing these and I hope you're liking them as well. We're getting a lot of nice feedback, which is really good. We've got a mailing list. If you sign up to torquaycomedyclub.co.uk/podcasts, it'll pop up saying enter your email to be the first to get episodes when they come out, and that list is growing by the day, and it's really nice to hear how people are enjoying them. We certainly love doing them, and we think it's a really interesting insight, and you're going to get a lot of that from this episode. So sit back and enjoy as we hear from Dom Joly. Hello, Dom Joly.
Hello, how are you doing?
Very well, how are you?
I'm all right, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm just back from a bit of travelling, which has been something I haven't done for quite a while because of lockdown. So I'm trying to get used to being back in England, but it's good.
Oh, okay, because you do a lot of travel writing and things, don't you? Was that for that, or was this just a personal holiday?
No, I was doing some travel writing in Ireland, and I'm just trying to finish my new book at the moment. So so I sort of went there to do a bit of writing, which was good.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Any memorable moments from the trip?
Well, it was a bit weird because you have to self-isolate in Ireland because it's in quarantine from England.
Right.
So I couldn't get out. I landed in Dublin and had to drive all the way across to the far west in Kerry. I couldn't get out of my car, and I had a lot of fun. And so when I wasn't writing, I was on a boat and swimming with seals and chasing dolphins, which was all quite exciting. And then my car broke down on the way back.
Oh, no.
And I was in a bit of a quandary as to what to do since I was in a quarantine zone. But anyway, it's all part of life, our new existence.
That's it, in the after times. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So just as a quick starter, can you just give a brief history of your entertainment career to date?
A brief history.
Well, yeah, I know there's a lot. To go through.
Okay. Well, I left university. I was a diplomat, and then I was a producer at ITN, and I was kind of going on the road to be quite serious, a sort of foreign correspondent, a sort of political journalist. And then I got fired from ITN for getting someone to hit David Mellor in the face with a football. And so I had to look around, and I ended up getting a job with my political experience as a researcher on the Mark Thomas comedy product, which is the very first kind of Michael Moore type show where we were having a go at politicians and stuff. And the very first day, they didn't have much money on the show. It was for Channel 4. Mark was seeing what they could take through a McDonald's drive-through. So we were taking a tank, a clown car, a hamburger van, and they didn't have anyone to do it. And I just said, I'll do it. And I think I realized at that moment that I found it incredibly easy and enjoyed doing that sort of stuff, but everyone else seemed to not find it as easy. So even though I didn't see it as a skill, I thought, I can do this. And so because of that, I then got a job on the Paramount Comedy Channel. I started making a whole lot of stuff, having a go at Tony Blair's Britain, at Cool Britannia, putting fake Millennium Domes in Peter Mandelson's garden, standing for election as a party called the Teddy Bear Alliance, having a lot of fun, really. And Channel 4, a lot of pop bands started watching the stuff that was going out on Paramount. Oasis used to watch it a lot, Blur, and it kind of got a bit of a cult following, and Channel 4 saw it, called me in and said, we'd like to give you a one-off, but we don't want you to do anything political, because the woman who commissioned it had just done Brass Eye. And she just said, I've been in court for 2 years. I can't face another 2 years. Is there any way you can do what you do, but just make it kind of silly, not about anything political or satirical? And I was all about satire and attacking stuff. But I actually thought, well, why not? And it was an incredibly liberating thing to do. And because of that, I started making what turned out to be Trigger Happy TV. We did a one-off, got a series, and then Trigger Happy became a monster. I did 2 series of that, 2 Christmas specials. It sold to 80 countries. It was just massive. And I think it was only about 5 years afterwards that I realized how big Trigger Happy was. And then I moved to the BBC in a terrible decision, but for whatever reasons, and I did 2 series of a fake chat show called This Is Dom Joly, which was clearly fake, and it was me being an arsehole, but everyone assumed that it was just me. So I made it too real. And then I kind of did another type of prank show called World Shut Your Mouth, which was basically going around the world doing trigger happy type stuff, which I greatly enjoyed and has only ever been showed once. And I still think it's my best show. I then got boosted at the BBC, and I kind of started to gravitate more towards my real love, which is travel and kind of incorporating humor. And I did a big show called Dom Joly's Happy Hour, where I went around the world investigating alcohol. So basically getting drunk around the world with my best friend, which was a lot of fun.
Brilliant.
And then I started writing my travel books, and I've written quite a few, including The Dark Tourist, where I went off on holidays to North Korea, Chernobyl, skiing in Iran. I became a monster hunter for scary monsters and super creeps. My last book, I just walked across Lebanon, and then just a multitude of other weird things, which you haven't got time nor have I to explain. So, yeah.
I knew from doing my research straight away that there was going to be a lot to cover because you've done an awful lot of stuff. But hearing yourself describe it in your own words and things, it really sort of comes into its own how much you have actually done.
It's weird when you look at it on a CV. It sort of looks like there was a plan. You know, like I started off in politics and a diplomat, and then got into satire, and then totally lucked out doing something I wasn't expecting to do, having this massive hit, which then opened doors for me that allowed me to become a travel writer, a columnist for The Independent, doing all these weird different things. But genuinely, the whole thing has been just one massive blag. But when the doors open for you to blag, you've got to be able to grab it, and you've got to be able to do something about it. And so I just think I'm really lucky. I just appear to have been born with a very quick mind in an ad-lib way. And I kind of love getting into situations where I have to be funny on the spot and deal with it. And that never felt like a skill to me. But the longer I've gone on, I've realized that it might not be a skill I've earned, but I've certainly worked at it, and I've got better and better at it. And a lot of people don't have that skill. I just assumed everyone had it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So with your wealth of experience and those skills that you have and things, it's going to be hard to pinpoint this down, I'm aware of that. But I mean, primarily on this podcast, we talk about the worst, weirdest, most embarrassing gigs, things like that. So are there any moments that sort of stick in your mind as, like, say, the cringy moments of things that have happened in your experience? Anything like that?
Well, the thing is, what I actually adore are cringy moments. Like, really, a lot of my humor is about setting up cringy moments so that people are looking at me as either as a character or doing something, and I'm in a terribly cringy moment, and I can see them walking past thinking, oh my God, thank God that's not me. And that's kind of a lot of my comedy. So for instance, I have for a comedian, I had a pathological fear of live performance. And I've never done stand-up. I did finally do a massive tour in 2010, and then I was in the middle of another tour when COVID came and stopped, but it wasn't stand-up. And the live sort of stuff I've done the cringiest things you could ever think of, but actually on purpose. As an example, in Full Britannia, I was sort of obsessed with those mind readers, who stand on stage and they go, someone give me a name, and Anne from Stafford stands up, and you go, Anne, do you have a brother called David? So I did that. I was given a big, massive introduction as America's most incredible mind reader, and it was great. And then I just got on stage, and a woman in front put her hand up, and I said, I'm sensing you've had a very, very close death in the family recently. And she went, no. And I go, okay, but do you know anyone who's dead? And she goes, well, yes. I go, I'm getting the name David. Is there someone called David very close to you? And again, this just went on and on, like just totally fucking up. And what I loved was, I suppose most people's worst fear is dying on stage. Whereas for me, I was trying to die on stage and watching people in the audience just thinking, oh my God, this is so painful. I also, in the early days of Trigger Happy, just as a joke, because I wasn't a stand-up, and I did it for the Trigger Happy extras, I got prostheticked up, so I looked like a sort of Scouse car thief. And I turned up at an open mic session at the London Comedy Store. And basically, you were allowed to go on for 15 minutes. That was much you could get. I'd never, ever done comedy before, like live comedy. So I just went on stage and I purposefully bombed, which again is the complete opposite of whatever. But it's quite funny because people were sitting in a comedy store with a sort of expectation that this was going to be funny, the less funny I tried to be. I mean, I was just literally saying things like, you know, who came here in a car? And a couple went, I went, yeah, me too. And then I went, has anyone ever been in a car and the traffic lights turn red and you have to stop? And they go, yeah. And I go, yeah, me too. And so normally those would die, but they were all, everyone was sort of chuckling to themselves thinking, this is some incredibly clever build to something. And it just never went anywhere. And it just drifted and it drifted. And after about 15 minutes, you could sense the room turn and people started to say, you're shit. And I'd say things like, do I come to your office? No, I don't. And like, so it was just great. And actually it was one of my favorite things in the whole world, because it's about the only way you could ever do stand-up comedy and not have that pit of fear which kind of drives everyone. So in a way it's a cop-out, I suppose, but oh my God, I loved it.
That does sound incredibly liberating, being able to go.
It is liberating. It is liberating, and in a way it's a cop-out, but it's because I'm, you know, just like I wouldn't expect to stand up just to go and do what I do. I think a lot of people don't realise the stuff I do. People still ask me things like, who writes Trigger Happy and stuff? It's like, no one writes it. It's all made up on the spot by me, you know. So it's somehow ad-libbing is not really probably seen as a skill because it just doesn't look like it is. And so when I did, and I wouldn't expect stand-ups to do that, just so I wouldn't expect to be a stand-up. So when I did my first tour, which was called Welcome to Wherever I Am, it was kind of like a director's commentary on stuff I'd done, but I was very wary about people coming thinking it was comedy and then not really getting jokes. So I did things which either worked or didn't. So like halfway through in the interval, I said, look, you know, I don't know whether this is good or bad, and judging by the reviews, it's appalling, but you know, I just want to give you the opportunity to get your own back. So in the interval, I'd bought thousands of these sort of bits of felt with stuffing in them that looked like stones. And so people had the opportunity at half time to go out and they could buy these for £1 each, which I thought was genius. And then they were allowed to throw them at me on stage. And so not only was I making money from them buying these stones, but they then gave them back to me. So I was quids in on that. And then I finished. I think I was so nervous that I wouldn't get any applause from the whole show, but I finished. I was filming the audience, and the idea was I was thinking of doing a Trigger Happy film, and I wanted to have a trailer which said, you know, a bit like when they had those horror films and they'd have a film looking out into the audience of a cinema and they'd go, this is what happens when this audience saw our latest horror film, and people are like throwing up and vomiting, you know, and you think, oh my God, I want to see that. I thought I wanted to do the same thing. So I wanted a whole lot of audiences, and I was filming it in infrared, and I wanted them all hurling abuse at me and then screaming and then not laughing. And I was going to do a sort of anti-ad. And the final thing was, at the end of every show, I just said, right, when I say go, I want you to all get up and just run screaming out the theatre. And that was the end of the show. Like, there was no applause, nothing. And I just kept filming these people running out screaming. So in a way, part of me looking back thinks, I think in a tiny way that was quite genius. But part of me thinks, the fuck were you doing? Because everyone got outside and then went, what, was that it? And I never got any applause. But so I've had a lot of cringy moments, but most of them are very self-inflicted, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I know it does. I agree with you. I think that's genius as well, that way of ending the show. And
well, I certainly shouldn't say I'm genius, but I'm only saying it because I've been so critical of it before. And actually thinking back, no, it wasn't that bad.
It sounds very clever, and the stoning idea as well. I think that was fantastic. So I mean,
well, marketing-wise, that was genius.
Yeah, and I know you say a lot of it's ad lib and things like that, and that Trigger Happy wasn't necessarily scripted or written, but it wasn't
at all scripted. No.
Well, there's bits and bobs like the stoning where you've got the idea as such of what you're going to do. Was it similar with the actual filming of Trigger Happy, where because you had the furry costumes, didn't they? And they would fight in parks and the big phone and things. How much of it was you with an abundance of props, and how much of it was today we're going to go out and do this and see if we can make funny out of it?
Almost all of it was just see what was going to get funny out of it. So a Trigger Happy day would be I'd drive into. I had a Vespa, and so did Sam, who I made Trigger Happy with. So we'd both Vespa in, and on the way in to central London where our office was, we'd often be thinking, you just get so into the zone of thinking it, and you'd see a milkman or something, you think, oh my God, milkman, I haven't done things a milkman, but whatever. We'd have ideas, and then we'd get into the office, and we'd sit and go, right, what are we going to do today? We were so time. We just were so badly planned. Like Trigger Happy took a year to make each one.
Oh wow!
And it's just mainly because we were so disorganized. But we'd sit in the office and think, what should we do? And then we thought we'd either think, oh, milkman, or we'd think we need some inspiration. So we'd then go to a place called Angels and Bermans, which was a costume shop very near us in Cambridge Circus, and they just had like warehouses of uniforms. So often I'd go up and down looking, and I'd spot, like, the traffic warden came from that, although obviously I hate traffic wardens, but say the milkman. So I'd think, okay, let's do a milkman. And we'd get a milkman's outfit, and I'd put it on, and then we'd go down and get in our Previa, which we'd rented, and then we'd literally just drive around town trying to think of what to do as a milkman. And then eventually we'd get so, frustrated, we'd stop somewhere, I'd get out, and I'd just start talking to people. People would say something and I'd do it, and often the very first thing you did was really good, or sometimes you thought, oh, that was funny, and then so it was just so unplanned and stuff. I mean, as an example, there was a great, one of my favorite Trigger Happy moments ever was in the first series, and we were down in Somerset in a sort of very fishing type village port called Porlock Weir. And I thought, because we're going down there, we knew we were going to film down in Somerset for 6 days. I'd kind of chucked in a whole lot of costumes that I thought might be useful. I hadn't really thought about it. And one of them was a sort of sea dog costume. So it was like yellow sou'wester, captain's hat, big boots. I sort of looked like an out of unemployed submarine commander. And so we got to this little fishing village, and I thought, well, this is good. I'll put this on, because that's the sort of guy that actually don't hang around fishing villages. But if you come from London, you think you're going to see. And so Sam went onto the beach looking up to a sort of walkway above the harbour. And I put the stuff on, and I wandered into the village, and I just said, look, we'll just see I'll just get chatting, and I'll find who this character is, which sounds very grand. And then we'll do a joke. The very first 2 people that I got up to were these 2 old women from Essex, who just immediately, like, their whole trip was there to meet someone like me. They were like, oh my God, they were like, all right. And so the moment they started talking, I just thought, oh my God, like, I could feel they were going to believe anything I said. So I started going on about, like, they go, oh, you got a boat here, have you? And I go, oh, that's right. I've been sailing these seas around here for like 40 years now. And they go, that's nice. And I go, yeah, of course, it wasn't so nice when I lost my wife. And they go, what? And I go, well, I lost my wife out there about 30 years ago. And they go, oh. And I go, I still go out there to try and find her, but she won't be back. And you just basically kind of built it, just thinking I could say anything to these people. And it was great. And that was the very first take. And we never filmed anything else with that character. That was just it. Other times with a traffic warden, you kind of knew traffic wardens everyone hated. So it was just about, how can you just come up with the most ridiculous scenarios for traffic wardens, from hailing a taxi, and when the taxi stopped, you slap a ticket on the taxi, to my favourite one, which was basically Sam had this old Renault 5, which is quite a light car, and it was parked outside his house. So I just stood next to the car, and when some people came past, I asked them whether they could help me push it, because he had the thing. So we pushed it onto a double yellow line, and then I gave it a ticket. And it was just about doing things where, even as Brits, where we just don't like to complain. We're not Americans. Like if I did the big mobile in America, people would just say, shut the fuck up, or pull a gun out. Whereas here, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to be embarrassed. So it was about doing things that made even Brits feel competent enough to go, hang on, that's not right.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about cringe-worthy moments, it was about putting yourself in situations that are almost like your own anxiety dreams. So we did one, there were 2 I loved, called Millionth Customer. One we did outside. There was this plethora of electric loos in London, those weird black things that sit down, and you put £1 in, and the whole front door slides open, and you go in. But you're kind of, my fear anyway, all the way through, is that halfway through you sitting on the loo, the door opens to reveal you. And then also there was this urban, I mean, it's actually true that those loos, when you go out of them, how they clean is the whole floor, everything goes up, and there's a thing just washes them, and then it goes back down. So there was this tiny urban myth that I always used to play on, because people had heard of things and thought, oh my God, it happens. I thought, what would happen if it went crazy, and you're on that loo and it just flicks you back in. And so there was a great one where I'm hammering on it and people are looking, and then I come out and I'm just soaking wet and I've got bog roll all over me. And you could see people thinking, oh my God, it actually happened. And then again with those loos, we did one where we waited for someone to go in, and the moment they're in, we put a banner above it saying, congratulations, millionth toilet customer user. And we had a mayor and paparazzi and a girl giving champagne. And again, it was just the idea when the door opened, we had a band playing, and it's just it was about anxiety dreams, really.
Yeah. Honestly, that sounds like it was so much fun. I mean, you could tell from watching it that you're having a lot of fun doing it, but just hearing you talk about it.
That was the amazing thing about Trigger Happy, I think, is that we were honestly, Sam and I had never done a TV program before. And we enjoyed, I mean, it was really hard work. Like, you know, I had a nervous breakdown about very near the end of the first series, because it was non-stop adrenaline and approaching people. And it was very stressful. And that's why in the end I canned Trigger Happy after 2 series, because it was very taxing, because it was just non-stop. But oh my God, we had just some of the greatest, funniest moments. And often the best moments, we had this thing that we used to call For the Beauty. And For the Beauty was just stuff that it kind of wouldn't have made sense to anyone else, but for us, it was just made us laugh more than anything. And it was just weird little moments that were fantastic. And an example of that led to World Shut Your Mouth, we used to just have a little thing in the van that every time we'd see something incredibly beautiful, like clearly amazing, Stonehenge or some amazing building, we'd all go, now that is shit. And it was just a little van joke. But when we got to World Shut Your Mouth, that developed into the opening sequence of every show in World Shut Your Mouth. I got the BBC to pay for me to go round the world to the 7 wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal, the Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Giza. And you'd think, well, you're there, you might as well film some other stuff. But no. I was so up my own arse. I wanted it to be comedically pure. And so all I did was stand in front of the Taj Mahal, and a woman, you know, a real tourist, wanders up and she's looking, and it's dawn. It's a beautiful shot. It's one of the most beautiful sights in the world. And I go, the Taj Mahal. And she goes, yeah, it's kind of ethereal, isn't it? And then there was a really long pause. I was going, please don't say anything, because I need to get this in. And then I'd just go, that is shit, and walked off, and that was it. And again, when I took that to BBC One, this was BBC One, they just went, this will never air. And in the end, they did air it, but very late. It wasn't BBC One. But the more, and I got very down on myself, thinking, what were you doing? But you know what? Now I look back, I still think that's fucking funny, so I'm proud of it.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, with shows that so heavily rely on random members of the public and things like that, were they all smooth sailing, or was there some that went a bit wrong? I can't imagine it was all people being up for it.
Oh my God, it was an absolute nightmare. I mean, obviously everyone that featured on the show, we had to get to sign consent forms, and that's an art in itself. You know, I had a very pretty girl and a very nice guy, one of them called Al Campbell, who's now a really well-known comedy director, but and it was a real skill as to who to send in once you'd done someone, because you could have the greatest hit in the world and then they'd refuse to sign, and it just was so dispiriting when they didn't, because you kind of felt, I'm never going to get that again. Like, it was all about spur of the moment, and when you had to do it again, it was very, very difficult. And you know, if there were no laws, I had another 5 series of Trigger Happy, like equally good, that were all there but we just couldn't use.
Yeah.
A lot of the times people didn't sign, not for reasons that you might think, but mainly because they were in public with someone they shouldn't be. There were a lot of people having affairs. An example of that was we were at the Prince Charles Cinema, and again, I liked filming out into the audience. Prince Charles Cinema in Leicester Square used to let me do almost anything, and I did loads of jokes there. And we had an infrared camera pointing out. I did a big mobile joke before the film. This was 2:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. And then we said, ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know, that was for Trigger Happy TV. We're really sorry, but you know, you're a part of it and we'll pay for your film. Anyone doesn't want to be in this, just let us know. And 8 couples stood up and all shuffled out and said, we don't want to be on it, because they were all there having a little dirty meet in the cinema. So there's a lot of adultery going on.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, from the point of view of getting people's consent, I hadn't even considered the logistical minefield that must be. We had a whole
language around it. I mean, we got to the stage, the very first series, obviously no one knew what Trigger Happy was, and it was difficult to get it people to sign, and also we weren't very good at it. We got, by the second series, people actually, when they knew it was Trigger Happy, even though they hadn't recognised me, were actually happier because they knew that the joke really wasn't about them. It wasn't mean, Trigger Happy.
Yeah.
So they were often happier. And also we got a lot better. If something was really good and I'd send the person in to get it and they just went, no, I'd have a scratch in my head, which indicated the runner then opened up a folder and there'd be £100. Like if we really wanted one, we'd have to bribe people sometimes. So we got a bit better at it. And also we just got a bit more organised in the sense that rather than just randomly getting a member of the public on the street, we try and think, how could we get it a bit more controlled? So sometimes if we were doing a shop, we would approach the manager of the shop, speak to him and say, look, we'd like to do this. Is there a good employee we could do? So we got a bit more organised so that when it was revealed, we could say, look, your manager's already in on it. And so it helped. But a lot of the time, a lot of Trigger Happy was just approaching people on the street. And it was just stressful.
Yeah.
Often people were quite relieved just to find out that there was an explanation for this weirdness, which was nice. But sometimes people just didn't get it, or they just didn't find it funny, which is completely fair enough. So I was always surprised anyone signed, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, the comfort in knowing that it was all for a reason and not just a really odd experience, I can completely relate to that from a public point of view. I can imagine that's very settling. So I remember reading as well, whilst the shows were out, all these shows that you've done, whilst they were out, and from my research for this interview, I've read a lot about arrests that you've had when filming these sorts of things. Is there one of those that sticks in your mind as the most bizarre, or just talk to me a bit about the arrests?
Well, arrests actually tended to happen when we were abroad a lot, actually. The English police, I was arrested once in Gloucestershire doing a burglar character because I'd approached a woman, she'd signed the release, it was all fine. But then she rang the police, and by the time she'd rung the police, she claimed that a black man, me, was threatening to do over the village post office with a shotgun. I don't know where she got it from. And so literally the sort of Cotswolds flying squad was sent out, armed response unit, but they couldn't find us. So in the end, we had to hand ourselves in Moreton in Marsh. But it was abroad that arrests were the weirdest. I got arrested on the Empire State Building doing my spy character, and the spy would approach people dressed in a gabardine mac, and I just thought it was a very filmic setting. It was the sort of place you'd imagine a Cary Grant film to happen. So I'd approach someone and tried to give them a briefcase on the viewing deck of the Empire State Building and said, you have the documents. And the guy freaked out, told someone, they spotted our camera, and I was put in a cell in the Empire State Building, like it had its own prison.
Oh, wow.
But it was quite cool. I managed the cameraman was arrested as well, but he managed to get the tape out, and while they weren't looking, throw it to our runner. So the runner took it. So that was all quite cool. But the weirdest one ever was we went to Zermatt in Switzerland, and I wanted to do some snow jokes. And again, we had no real ideas. The only thing I'd taken with me was a snowman. And that actually worked really well because I just stood as a snowman, very simple joke, in a snowy ski resort. And as people walked past, when they weren't looking, I'd throw a snowball at them, it would hit them, and then they'd look round and the snowman was just not moving. But we had to think about other stuff to do. And I suddenly thought Yeti. We hadn't brought a Yeti costume with us, but we found a costume shop that had a gorilla. So I thought, that's all right, that's Yeti-ish. So I dressed up in this sort of semi-Yeti costume, and we went all the way up on the ski slopes. And the joke was we put a big sign on the ski slope saying, danger, Yeti. Obviously no Yetis in whether you believe them or not, but no Yetis in the Alps. And then about 100 meters later, I'm just dressed as a Yeti, sitting on a deck chair with a beer, just like hearing people as they come past. It's like a really simple joke, filled the time. But of course, the Swiss, not a great sense of humor. They sent the Swiss ski patrol down, and we were not allowed to be filming. So they arrested me, and I was taken down to Zermatt, where there was only one. It's not a lot of crime in Switzerland. It's corporate crime. There's no real crime. And I was taken to Zermatt's only cell, where I had to share it with, as far as I could see, Switzerland's only burglar. And this burglar was in there, and I was marched in sort of ski gear, but dressed as a gorilla. And we both sat there for quite a long time staring at each other. And I could see him thinking, what the fuck have you done? But in the end, we got chatting, and he was a very nice guy.
I mean, it does lead me on to one thing I wanted to talk about, which I feel might be that trap, but I've seen it documented elsewhere as well. I saw that you believe in Lebanon. You went to school with Osama bin Laden.
I did go to school with Osama bin Laden for a year, yeah. I went to Quaker school, a Quaker high school, which was set up by Quakers from Darlington, of all places, in the hills above Beirut in 1860. And I was there for a year before I got sent to boarding school in England at the age of 7. And I went back to do a documentary, a kind of precursor to Happy Hour, where I went from Lebanon on a road trip into Syria. And when we got to Lebanon, the director said, you know, it'd be nice to see where you went to school here and stuff. And so I went back to my old school. Some fixer had apparently set up that we could film there. So we were wandering around. And the headmistress came out absolutely livid because there was this film crew in her and no one had told her. And I realised the fixer had done exactly what I would do if I was a fixer. He'd just taken the money and fucked off, basically. So headmistress was screaming, "Who are you? Why are you filming my school?" And I was like, whoa, 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 you know, I'm an old boy here. And she was going, "Well, why are you filming?" And I said, "Well, you know, not to blow my own trumpet, but I'm probably the most famous old boy from this school, and, you know, people would like to hear about it." And she looked at me like, it just so dismissively, and she goes, "I don't think so." And I went, "Really? Well, who's more famous?" And she went, "Osama bin Laden." And I went, "Okay, I think you win." And then, of course, the school turned, because then the school realised, because the irony was the school's a Quaker school. Like, Quakers are famous for pacifism. So if ever a school has fucked up more in its teachings, is a Quaker school that produces Osama bin Laden. So it's not something they were particularly proud of. You know, taking prospective parents around, they wouldn't be going, and of course, maybe you know some of our most famous alumni, Osama bin Laden, Dom Joly. So yeah, I did. And when he was 16 and I was 6, we were at the school together for a year. Obviously, I don't remember him. He didn't wander around in white robes pointing at buildings. In fact, the bin Ladens at the time, there's a picture of the whole family in Stockholm in the late 70s. They look more like the Partridge Family, sort of flares and stuff. So I don't remember him, but there you go. You know, I've looked him up on Friends Reunited. But
so what we do at the end of the podcast, as we're coming to the end now, I give you a collective score for all of the stories that you've told me, and that's a collective score out of 15.
This is terrible because my kid just got his GCSEs today, so I'm hoping I did better than him.
Well, yeah, there's no algorithm involved with mine. What we do is we base it on 3 counts. So we include the cringeworthiness, any mental scars, and how it's changed you as a person.
I'm telling you now, I win on mental scars.
So I completely agree. You're marking high on a 5 out of 5 for that one.
That's good.
Cringeworthiness. I mean, you said yourself, it's all those anxiety-inducing moments that you try to, you know, form as part of Trigger Happy. You know, the comedy store bombing, and I love going around to the 7 Wonders and just declaring that they are shit. And I think, I think all of that is fantastic. So again, it's another high score. I'm giving you a 5 out of 5 for that one as well.
I'm very happy.
And how it's changed you as a person. I mean, from an outside point of view, of course, you're the best person to give yourself this score. But I mean, saying how you've started off, you know, as the researcher and things, and moving into this sort of role, doing something that you've said yourself you didn't think was necessarily a skill, the ad-libbing and things, which of course it is. So I mean, how I think that's another high score for that one. But how out of 5, what would you give yourself for how all these experiences have changed you as a person?
Well, I mean, they've definitely changed me to an extraordinary extent. I mean, what's weird is that I've done it the other way around. Like, normally you start off doing the stupid stuff, dressing as a squirrel, and then you become serious. Whereas I started off quite serious, like doing political stuff, and I was a diplomat, and then became a squirrel. But I'm now gone back to a little more serious now, because really writing is my love. So, yeah, I mean, all these things change you. It's a combination of that 10,000 hours syndrome. If you've done something for 10,000 hours, you become better and better at it. But also, the older you get, I mean, my wife will disagree, but you do become a more rounded person. Like, with all the experiences you've had, it changes you. So I'm definitely a very, very different beast from the person that did Trigger Happy. But then everyone is, aren't they, after 20 years? So, but no, I mean, I've done an extraordinary amount of things that have definitely shaped and changed the way I think about stuff. So fuck it, I'm going to give myself a 5.
5, another 5. That's great. Lovely. So it's a podcast first, and I'm very pleased to be awarding you 15 out of 15.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled, but I'm slightly worried that the government are going to downgrade that. But so I'm just going to take it straight away.
Definitely.
My wife is on the next door computer, and she laughed, and I haven't made her laugh in 18 years, so that's good.
Good, good. I'm glad to be a part of it. But lovely. Yeah. So 15 out of 15. We'll add you to the leaderboard. We've got like a Top Gear style fastest
Oh,
lap
excellent.
leaderboard going. So we'll add you to that. You'll be at the top. And yeah, just before we go, is there anything we should know? Anything? How can people find you? Anything you've got upcoming you want to promote?
Well, I was supposed to be in Torquay for my tour, and that got cancelled.
Yes.
Unfortunately, now it was all rescheduled, and then that's gone again. But I think I have got a whole new tour next year now, where I'm touring my holiday snaps and telling these sort of stories about weird and odd things I've done around the world. And I am coming to Torquay, but I'm afraid I can't tell you what the dates are because it keeps changing and cancelling. But I promise I'm coming down. And I was really, I've never been to Torquay, and as someone that is, weirdly, I've just been writing about it in my new book is about driving around England, and I was doing a big bit about Fawlty Towers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Torquay's so famous for Fawlty Towers, and Fawlty Towers seemingly a bad thing, but Fawlty Towers is still, to me, and I wrote it, the most perfect 12 episodes of any show ever made for television, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And that was in Torquay, so I'm definitely wanting to visit the English Riviera at some stage soon. I just hope the weather will be good.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. I mean, unfortunately, there's a thing with Torquay Council where they're trying to move away from the Fawlty Towers image that we once had. But I completely agree. I think we need to keep hold of it. I think it's a fantastic piece of history.
I can see from a tourist point of view that being known as Fawlty Towers is not your ideal scenario. But I think they need to be incredibly proud of it because it's something so quintessentially English about all of Fawlty Towers, and I think it's brilliant. I was just writing that if you were an incomer, if you were someone new to this country in the 70s, there would have been no better crash course to English society, how to survive the intricacies and subtleties of the class system and stuff before Thatcher kind of blew it all open than watching Fawlty Towers. It was just pitch perfect. So Torquay can be absolutely stunningly proud of that. I just found out that my hometown, Cheltenham, was where Eric Morecambe actually died. He had a heart attack on stage in Tewkesbury and was taken to Cheltenham here. So you know what? I think you guys do better than Cheltenham in the comedy stakes.
Good. That's good to hear. So we'll look forward to seeing you when you come to bring your next tour show down. What we'll do, we'll add a link for the listeners and the watchers. We'll add a link below to your website, and then presumably keep an eye on that. And then when tickets become available, definitely come and check it out.
That'd be great. I really appreciate that. I can't wait to get down there. Thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, thank you very much for doing it. It's great chatting to you.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.